This is just going to be a brief supplemental video. We just read through the plagues of Egypt and the Exodus story. And I wanted to make a few comments on this. There are two big theories that I've heard coming about the whole thing. And I don't really like either one of them, but I wanted to mention them because they are out there. And first of all is the idea they want to explain the 10 plagues through natural processes. And the biggest theory on this is that all of them are the result of a volcanic eruption that happened in the North Atlantic. And so this causes the shock waves kill the microscopic creature, the small fish and everything, causing the blood to pour out and mingle with the water. Then, the frogs are fleeing from it, and then the flies and everything, all the creature plagues, all the pestilences are supposed to be the animals fleeing south from this volcanic eruption. And then the cloud of the 3 days of darkness is the ash cloud covering the sky. Various explanations like this. The problem I have with this is that it doesn't actually match the story. As I've mentioned before, the real power of Moses wasn't in summoning these things, but it was in dismissing them. And secondly, in putting a difference between Egypt and Goshen of the children of Israel. So yes, all the water turned to blood. This wasn't just blood mingling with the water. This was water transforming into blood. That's what the scriptures tell us happened. And the priests of Pharaoh did the same thing. If this was just fish being killed by a volcanic eruption and their blood polluting the water, what did the priests of Pharaoh do? And with the frogs coming, the priests of Pharaoh also summoned the frogs. So how did that work with that volcanic eruption? I think the last one the priests couldn't do was summoning the lice, turning the dust into lice. And when the flies came, they only came on Egypt. The flies, the boils and sores, which are supposed to be infections caused by this volcanic ash. And this cloud of darkness that covered Egypt, it states specifically that Goshen had light. If it was just a volcanic eruption and this big ash cloud, it would have covered everything. So this natural explanation of, Moses was just predicting these things happening, it doesn't work. The text does not support that kind of a explanation. These things were commanded by God. They happened when God commanded them. They ended when God commanded them. And most of them, I think 7 out of the 10, did not affect Goshen, but they did affect everything else. This separation proves, or it is enough to show that this wasn't a natural thing. Or even if some of it was caused by this volcanic eruption that they're claiming, the fact that God was able to focus it and keep it in one place is enough to make it a miracle. We don't need these natural explanations. The second idea is that God, with each plague, was specifically targeting one of the Egyptian gods to prove himself better than that particular god. It's a nice theory, but it doesn't really hold water, in my opinion. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense. It's like the first one, what is it? Happy. He's the god of the Nile. Great. We have the turning the Nile into blood. An actual direct assault on what he would be the god of. That makes sense. But then we have Hecate is supposed to be represented by the frogs. Why? Because in Egyptian art, she's drawn looking like a frog. Not because the frogs have anything to do with what her domain or what would be called her honor was. Had nothing to do with that. Just she looked like a frog. So God chose to send frog. This just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think you had, Geb, god of the earth, flies of the dust turning into flies. That also kind of makes sense. But then you have Kepri. He's supposed to be the flies. Why? because he's drawn to look like a fly. Except he's not. He's drawn to look like a scarab beetle. And it's not even to look like a scarab beetle. It's just the scarab beetle is put in place of his head. See, the Egyptian drawings, I don't think the Egyptians believed their god looked like this. They were just artistic depictions. And so the scarab beetle laid its eggs in a pile of dung and then would roll it up the hill. And the eggs would hatch and eat their way out. And this became a symbol of the god Khepri, who would push the sun across the sky, just like the scarab beetle would push the dung. So he was drawn with a scarab as a head. Not flies, and even if it was a fly, it wouldn't mean anything. And it goes on, like Ra, god of the sun and all that, works good for the darkness. But they say Set is, god of storms and chaos, and he's supposed to be represented by the locusts? How? If you're going to attack Set, you'd want to create order, not create chaos. Sorry about that light there. You'd want to create order, not chaos. And the only indication of storms is that an east wind brought the locusts and a west wind banished them. The connections are very weak, very flimsy for this theory. The other part of this theory is going into numerology, which I don't like at all. This idea that, God uses specific numbers to represent certain things. It gets you the idea. It doesn't really work real well. There's a lot of places where the numbers don't match things and they have to do weird twists and turns to make the numbers match. But supposedly 10 is supposed to be a completion, 10 commandments, that's your complete law. 10 plagues is a complete destruction, this kind of stuff. And so you need the 10 plagues and you need it to match up with the 10 Egyptian gods. And it really just feels forced, these kind of things. And the numerology stuff, I've heard a lot of different explanations, and generally they feel very forced. The explanations don't really fit. You have to, it's like I heard ones, look at the ages of all the ancient patriarchs. They're all divided by, these ones can be divided by 5. And the ones that can't be divided by 5, well, if we add 4, 7, or 9 to them, well, then they can be divided by 5. It's like, yeah, you guys, we got to be more sensible about this. Let's not just jump on every possible idea to try and understand, to try and make sense of these things. God had 10 plagues. Why? Because it took that many plagues for Pharaoh to let Israel go. That's why. We don't need any other explanation. And I just wanted to put that out. I've heard people latch onto these kind of ideas because it tends to make sense of the scriptures. And it does. It does. It gives you a kind of a blueprint of which to understand the scriptures by. And a lot of people in modern day read the scriptures, and the old language and the idioms and the symbolisms kind of are confusing. And so they like having these frameworks. But these frameworks rarely actually fit. They're always kind of jury-rigged in there so that you can make sense. But in doing so, you actually lose a lot. I think you really have to alter your perception of the scriptures. You have to take what the scriptures say and change it in order to fit these frameworks that people create. And I think it's a bad idea. I think boy, that light is really bothering this video. Sorry about that, but I just think we can do without it and still understand the scriptures. We don't need these frameworks. And if we can get a framework that works, fine. But we shouldn't try to force the scriptures to fit into these kind of frameworks that people have come up with, because it will never give us a full understanding. But that's all I wanted to say here. I will be switching over to the book of Job in my next few videos, so keep an eye out for those.